Okay, now we are going to look at a couple of approaches that could be used to teach science. And all of these approaches have been linked to developing scientific literacy. So let's look at a couple of them now. Okay, we're going to start with contextualized learning. Now, what is meant by contextualized learning? Well, it's the instruction that involves developing activities that involve students in applying scientific knowledge in real-world situations. So they work in teams, they reflect on what they have learned through the activity, but they must apply their learning into real-world situations. You have to provide students with authentic activities in a contextualized setting, which will help them to make the real-world connections with the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics that are needed to enhance their knowledge, skill, and abilities in these areas. Now, the most important component of contextualized learning is the use of authentic activities. So activities similar to those that take place in the real world outside of school. Just use the example of series and parallel circuits. In other words, students have to work as electricians to set up a circuit in a house or along a city street. So you're giving them real world situations. They have to investigate the current and potential difference in series and parallel circuits to enhance their skills in science. And they have to set up a model circuit and wire a house and street block. That must be the authentic activity that they are involved with as electricians in a real world situation. They have to then explain why houses and street blocks are wired in the way that they are wired. So get them to reflect on their learning, to now apply what they've learned and what they've seen to something that is real in the real world. So they have to reflect on their learning. What have they learned? Now, does CAPS provide room for that? Yes, because it says that CAPS should equip learners to have the necessary skills for self-fulfillment and meaningful participation in society as citizens of a free country. So being able to take up their role or work or with their knowledge and skills. Provide access to higher education. To become an electrician would be for example, going to TVET colleges. Then you have to facilitate the transition of learners from educational institutions to the workplace. So here we see students are going from imagining that they're being electricians, going from school into the workplace. And then the science learned at school should be relevant to everyday life with examples of applications. So yes, CAPS does allow a contextualized approach to learning. Okay, now let's look at the second one, which is the history and philosophy of science. Now, a core feature of this approach is formed by the development of historical case studies for use in lessons. So you use actual historical case studies. Teaching methods must comprise student-centered activities, which must include creative writing for understanding science and scientists and they must do role-play activities. Emphasis must be laid on the experimental work which was done by those scientists to help and one tries to give the true to the original replications of the historical apparatus that is specially built for the purpose. So if you're going to use this approach, there are materials that can be used, but you try and authenticate the actual experiments the scientists did. And you must allow for reflection again, giving the opportunity for students to explicitly discuss the relationship between the history, knowledge acquisition, and the application of the scientific findings that they have been looking at. Does CAPS allow such an opportunity? Well, let's look at electrostatics. There are 2 episodes there. The series of the historic genetic introduction to electricity, William Gilbert separating the magnetic attraction under a magnifying glass experiment. Then there's also the autoqueric forces, analogies, and the quality of scientific instruments. So again, here are the episodes with the historical approach and the experiments they did, the authentic experiments and so on. Is there place for it in CAP's curriculum? Well, it says that careful selection of content should promote the history of science and the relationship between natural science and other subjects. There must be an appreciation of the history of scientific discoveries. So yes, there is scope for this approach. Let's look at the third approach, science, technology, and the society approach, or the STS approach. This approach is designed to make traditional concepts and processes found in typical science programs more appropriate and relevant to the lives of students in order to develop their scientific literacy. The curriculum addresses a broad range of environmental, industrial, technological, social, and political problems that have a scientific basis, or socio-scientific issues. An instructional approach that incorporates appropriate STS, knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values must be used. So it's got to be both the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and the values, because you want students to make a decision in the end. So you start with students and their questions and use their resources. There could be something in a local newspaper article, and you start with the students in mind. They must be available to work for problem resolution. So this is a problem-solving approach, and advancing it to take actual actions individually or in groups to resolve actual issues. So you want them to get to the point where they make a decision and they act either individually or in a group. So let's say there's a cholera outbreak. So you start with the issue. There's a newspaper article about cholera and its outbreak. The use of technology, ways to purify drinking water. You look at that within this problem. You want people to stop getting sick. They must know how to use the technology to purify drinking water. Let's then learn the science content. So for example, mixtures and microorganisms and the chemistry of water purification. That's the science. Then take action. Design posters about hygiene. That is the action that they're taking. So the STS approach must always go from science, from the society, must move through the technology and into the science concepts and skills so that students make a decision. Is there scope for it in CAPS? Well, it says you should equip learners to meaningful participation in society as citizens. So yes, they have to make informed decisions about science through careful selection of the content. What is the contribution of science to societal justice and societal development? The need for using scientific knowledge responsibly in the interest of ourselves, society, and the environment, and the practical and ethical consequences of the decisions based on science. So yes, there's scope for the STS. Okay, so here are the readings that you can access to find out more about these approaches. I still have two more to have a look at. We'll do that, look at that in the next. And the one pager I want you to consider either using the contextualized learning approach, the history of and philosophy of science approach, STS, or the other two we're going to be looking at, and how would you use this approach in teaching a topic in grade 8 or grade 9. I think in this case I've actually provided you the topics I'd like you to try and consider or to apply these approaches to.